the Donny tribe, again, Casey, that survives almost exclusively off of sweet potatoes. They're much like as I mentioned, like the Papua New Guineans of Tukasinta, and so their diet probably 90+% sweet potatoes. But we absolutely are certain that they're not even that population. They're not living entirely ancestrally, and we know that from their the fact that they live fairly close to Wamena. They live close, which is a small village or a city, but they live close to where they can get some processed foods out of a little shack, essentially, that sells all kinds of candies. And we're not sure if they sold vegetable oils, but that's where they're getting some candy and cigarettes from there. But the thing that, I think more than anything suggested to Suze and I that they're not completely ancestral is the fact that their children had several of them were either they were overweight or obese. One was obese, that we think we probably agreed upon. But there was also two children that looked like they definitely had malnutrition. They were severely malnourished. One, I think, had kwashiorkor, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but that's the condition that is a protein a protein deficiency, and leaves them with such a low level of albumin in the blood that they spill out fluid from their liver into the gut, into the belly, and it's called ascites. And so you see these children they're very, very emaciated, but they have this distended belly, which is full of fluid. And we saw one child like that. And that alone tells us that they're probably getting, we think, they're certainly not getting enough nutrients. There's no question. They're not getting enough protein. And again, it's because they live almost exclusively off sweet potatoes. They would occasionally have pork, but it's probably about once a month, because they prize their pigs and they don't kill their pigs very often. And so
and they won't kill their own pigs because they're like their pets. They cherish their pigs, and they're also full of money and currency as well. So if they're going to get married, it's exchanging with the parents of the woman they're going to marry. That becomes, how many pigs is she worth? But it was just very fascinating to see that it was so true that sweet potatoes are just such a huge part. But they do have fruit. I mean, and you'll see in the slides that there's fruit everywhere. I mean, in all the islands, it is a plethora of fruit wherever you turn, and they can just go and pick the fruit. So they do eat bananas, and they have pandan, which is a red fruit. And they've got, pineapple and just the most beautiful fruit. And we could talk about, Chris, how what we felt what it was doing for our health. Just eating the food that they had was so filled with nutrients compared to what our food sources are. They're just remarkable. I mean, what it was doing for our health when we were feeling good at a given time. So, Chris, if you want to talk about that, I don't know.
Well, I'll just say this. So among all of the Donny tribe's adults, we did not see one person who was obese. I don't think we saw one. Did we, Suze?
No, the only thing we noticed with them, well, there's a couple things we noticed is, of course, they smoke heavily. It was constant. There was smoking. And a lot of the cigarettes are brought to them, as is the candy and the junk food, by the tourists. Like I said before I left, Case, I was concerned what the tourists were bringing, and it was exactly what I had surmised. But they're aging. The women who are in their 30s and 40s, they're looking very aged, very old. Their skin, and yes, they're in the sun a lot, but they're not aging well. Their skin, they don't wear a lot of clothing, so even their skin is sagging. They just aren't aging well. And again, to me, and I hope, Chris, you'll agree with this, is that they're lacking in nutrients. I mean, you can only get so much out of sweet potatoes and the fruit that they're eating. And I just think that when we look at all of the different Native people that we get to spend time with in Vanuatu, they were just this group of this tribe that we went to spend the day with, and they were just so beautiful. Their skin, they were, this man, I've got a video of him as well, and he was just radiant and just so vibrant. He was in, maybe they don't know their ages. If you ask them how old they are, they do not know how old, because they don't keep records of how old they are. And he said maybe between 50 and 60, he might be that age. And he was just magnificent. He was considered like the warrior. He walked on hot coals. He showed us how he could do that. It didn't bother him a bit, but he was showing us that, he was just a stellar specimen. And compared to, and they eat fish, they eat a lot of fish. And so comparing that tribe of people who have a lot of fruit and vegetables, taro and sweet potatoes and things, but they also incorporate fish and chicken. And the Dani tribe do not. And so there was a big difference in health and how they're aging. And you'll see in some of the pictures I'll show, the older men, that was this man, I mean, he was in his 90s. I think I said to Chris, maybe he was 100, I don't know, but he was so frail, just so frail. And I thought, boy, had he been eating some fish and had more protein and just, he would have been aging better. And so I think that's a great takeaway there. We need to have animal products. We'd have to, Chris.
Okay. This is fascinating. And this is a totally honest and fair question. There's tons of nuance. It's not black or white, but part of, the idea of your writing and the ancestral diet revolution is that it's not necessarily the fat versus the carbohydrates per se, or plant food versus animal foods per se. It's more seed oils. Having now been to this spot, I'm asking this question on behalf of every low carb person, every carnivore person that listens to this show. Did you say seeing their health the way they were changed your opinion in any way, or did it enhance the position you already had to begin with?
Well, for me as a former vegan, and I know how I was falling apart as a vegan, and I eat a lot of sweet potatoes as a vegan, but I ate a lot of everything else that was vegan. And I just know what now I'm mostly a meat-based person. I feel, and I've said this before, I cannot imagine not having meat so heavily in my diet, because I need that. And I think like my daughters would say that my skin when I was vegan was so thin, and they would say, it looks like old lady skin, they look at my legs and so forth. And now it's like, I feel more plump. I just feel like I'm aging so much better now compared to what I did. And it totally was verified by seeing the tribes that do not hardly have any animal compared to those that have quite a bit in their diet. Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, so it didn't change anything that I believe at all, Casey. In fact, everything we saw was supportive of what's in our book, The Ancestral Diet Revolution. So in that book, and in some of my presentations, as you know, I've reviewed the Papua New Guineans of Tukasinta that lived off of sweet potatoes, just like the Dani tribe. And Professor Sinnott and White that evaluated those Papua New Guineans, they wrote that they had terrible dentition and they had very high levels of arthritis. This is we don't know about the arthritis, and there's a very significant communication barrier, even with our guides and our interpreter. We really didn't have very good translation between us and the Dani people, but their teeth, the Dani tribe living off mostly sweet potatoes, were absolutely atrocious. They've lost a lot of teeth. Their teeth are decaying. They look rusty. They look absolutely terrible. But now I can't say anything about the arthritis in the Dani tribe, because we weren't able to really ask that question and get translation. But I'll tell you, when we took this hike up the mountain, We went with we had two guides. We have two guides, and the lady that showed us how to make salt, Suze, was it 2 or 3?
We had our porter and we had our guide, and then we had a male Denny member and a female Denny member. And they're all heavily smoking. I mean, they're smoking even when they're walking and hiking. And we were talking about this with Chris last night. And I said, funny. I said, when I would sit in their huts with them and I'm dying because they're smoking away. And plus they've got the fire going and there's just so much smoke and I'm not used to it. And I'm coughing, they're not coughing. But when we're hiking and putting in such effort, there was no wheezing, there was no coughing. They had stamina, unbelievable stamina for being such heavy smokers. And it was remarkable.